Hi, my name is Keonda Squires, and my individual presentation is on Emily Dickinson with a corresponding article by Seth Archer, I Had a Terror. About Emily Dickinson. Emily Dickinson was born on December 10, 1830 to a very prominent family in Amherst, Massachusetts. Dickinson was the second of three born to Elizabeth Norcross Dickinson and Edward Dickinson. Her father was a Yale graduate, lawyer, congressman, and the conservative leader of their church, Congregational First Church of Christ. She attended Amherst College from 1840 to 1847, where she studied English and the science as well as Latin, botany, and mathematics. She also attended Mount Holyoke College for a year. Dickinson lived a leisured and simple life. She enjoyed gardening, writing, participating in household activities, and local college events. Besides one big trip to D.C. and Philly in 1855, Dickinson stayed close to home. When her mother became chronically ill, which her and her mother weren't that close as well as her father, Dickinson would barely leave the homestead to be near her. By 1860, Dickinson almost lived in complete isolation from the outside world. Dickinson began writing poetry in secret around 1850. She wrote thousands of poems, but only 7 of them are published in her lifetime. Before Dickinson's death, she asked her sister to burn all her poems, but instead her sister published her work. Emily Dickinson passed in Amherst in 1886 from Bright's disease. Context: Emily Dickinson's calling as a poet began as a teenager. During a short but strong period of creativity, Dickinson came into her own as an artist. This resulted in her composing, revising, and saving hundreds of poems. This period, which researchers identify as 1858 to 1865, Dickinson's poetry was written of the most important event of American 19th century history, the Civil War. For example, in Emily Dickinson's poem, Success is Counted Sweetest, a deeper meaning may express that those who succeed place the highest value on success, while to understand one's value is a painful need, as the army defined victory. A dying soldier hears from a distance the sounds of the victors. In the article, Archer mentioned that the symptoms of Dickinson's mental illness had many names during the 19th century. While in the 18th century, no one can make sense of her mental illness, having no treatment for panic disorder. As far as the author's biography, I didn't really find much or any at all internet source, so I elaborated on the information I got from the article. So, as we already know, Seth Archer wrote I Had a Terror, Emily Dickinson's Demon. According to his article, Seth Archer was not a fan of Dickinson's work until established that they both suffered from panic disorder. He says that in the article, after his panic attack in 2006 in Times Square, which was one of the scariest moments he had experienced, he 9 months later, he's painting a house, and he went to the library to get something to, I guess, entertain him. So the library's option was slim, so he ended up getting, basically that's how he ended up picking up Emily Dickinson's writing. So his research in depth of Emily Dickinson began after hearing her admit to experience of terror in one of the recordings that he was listening to. Convention. Even though Dickinson understood her own genius when she lived, Dickinson's great poetic achievement was not fully realized until years after her death. Many researchers identify Dickinson's style as modern poetry. At the time of her writing, the conventions of poetry required strict form. Dickinson's poetry included unusual rhythmic patterns and sonnets, striking respected critics as sloppy and incept during the 18th centuries. As time passed, Dickinson's style of work was repeated by many revered poets. However, while she lived, few publishers could not appreciate the modernism of her form, making her unique technique uncomfortable to them. Publishers could not see beyond it to appreciate her jewels of imagery and unexpected and fresh use of metaphors. Topic of discussion 1. Dickinson's life compared to Archer, who lived a life of seclusion, dread, and panic. Archer was able to be diagnosed with a mental disorder, making it manageable to participate in daily activities. Whereas I said earlier that in Dickinson's time era, they didn't have or know of anything for panic disorder. So that's something she had to deal with. And that's one reason why he admires her for being able to write and go through with, well, be a strong writer and have that mental illness. Archer's life comparison to Dickinson's life with panic disorder pointed out that like Dickinson, he had quite a happy childhood with occasional signs of undue anxiety. He was struck in his mid-20s by panic episodes that later resurfaced in his early 30s, and he had productive, creative periods and dry spells like Dickinson. 2. Although Emily Dickinson lived her life imprisoned by a mental illness that had no treatment during the 18th century, Dickinson's poetry expressed her mental distress, giving psychologists a science of what her illness consists of. Archer acknowledged this within his article, stating that in the pages that follow, I wish to highlight a widely misconstrued aspect of Emily Dickinson's life, and to add in some small part of the understanding of Dickinson's ingenious artistry in light of her mental illness. Topic discussion 3. Archer's admiration of Dickinson's work questioned the acceptance of her poetry. Due to her family being her first publisher's aggressive editing, Archer clearly saw the family's reasoning as protecting Dickinson. At first, Dickinson's writing, she wrote to her family and her friends notes and things, but eventually she cut all that off when she went into, deeper anxiety. So, Archer stated that there are many reasons, historical and otherwise, for our having resisted the associated mental illness with Emily Dickinson. However, if Dickinson was greatly intelligent, would today's readers be willing to accept that Dickinson was mentally ill? Archer linked that Dickinson often wrote of death as an expression of her suffering with panic attacks. For instance, Emily Dickinson's poem, I Cannot Stop for Death. The poem discusses death in a very dull manner, but is done in a very light tone. This illustrates that Dickinson does not take death as a devastation. Instead, she accompanies death in the same carriage to eternity. This form of her work shows that she had an open-minded attitude towards death. Topic discussion 5. Dickinson's life was made of a victim due to her panic disorder. Archer said this being that of a victim himself, panic disorder seems to be a prison of no escape, while for Dickinson it was a prison of the mind's own making, being no escape of a troubled conscience. Considering Archer's 9 months of uncontrolled panic episodes, he compared to Dickinson's mental illness, which he had dealt with for maybe 30 years, saddened him. Archer said if only she could have separated her mind, from body or that part of her consciousness that pains her, she would. But the mind itself is invisible, let alone when suffering a mental illness. This is my works cited. Thank you. If you have any questions, feel free to answer. Ask them.